Get Back is a song recorded by the Beatles, originally released as a single on April 11, 1969 and credited to the Beatles with Billy Preston. A different mix of the song later became the closing track of Let It Be, which was the Beatles' last album released just after the group split. The single version was later issued on CD on the second disc of the Past Masters compilation. The single reached number 1 in the United Kingdom, the United States, Ireland, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, France, West Germany, and Mexico. It was the Beatles' only single that credited another artist at their request. Get Back was the Beatles' first single release in true stereo in the US. In the UK, the Beatles' singles remained monaural until the following release, The Ballad of John and Yoko. Composition, musical development. Get Back is unusual in the Beatles' canon in that almost every moment of the song's evolution has been extensively documented, from its beginning as an offhand riff to its final mixing in several versions. Much of this documentation is in the form of illegal bootleg recordings, and is recounted in the book Get Back, the unauthorized chronicle of the Beatles' Let It Be disaster by Doug Sulpy and Ray Schweigart. The song's melody grew out of some unstructured jamming on January 7, 1969 during rehearsal sessions on the soundstage at Twickenham Studios. Over the next few minutes, McCartney introduced some of the lyrics, reworking Get Back to the Place You Should Be from fellow Beatle George Harrison's Sour Milk Sea into Get Back to Where You Once Belonged. McCartney had played bass on Jackie Lomax's recording of Sour Milk Sea a few months earlier. On January 9 McCartney brought a more developed version of Get Back to the group, with the Sweet Loretta verse close to its finished version. For the press release to promote the Get Back single, McCartney wrote, "We were sitting in the studio and we made it up out of thin air. We started to write words there and thinner. When we finished it, we recorded it at Apple Studios and made it into a song to rollercoast by." At the beginning of the Let It Be version of the song, Lennon can be heard jokingly saying Sweet Loretta fart, she thought she was a cleaner, but she was a frying pan. The album version of the song also ends with him famously quipping, "I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we passed the audition." Originally he said that at the end of the rooftop concert, but Phil Spector edited it into the Get Back song on the Let It Be album. In 1980, Lennon stated that there's some underlying thing about Yoko in there, saying that McCartney looked at Yoko Ono in the studio every time he sang Get Back to Where You Once Belonged. Early versions, around the time he was developing the lyrics to Get Back, McCartney satirized the Rivers of Blood speech by former British Cabinet Minister Enoch Powell in a brief jam that has become known as the Commonwealth song. The lyrics included a line, "You'd better get back to your Commonwealth homes." The group improvised various temporary lyrics for Get Back, leading to what has become known in Beatles folklore as the No Pakistanis version. This version is more racially charged, and addresses attitudes toward immigrants in America and Britain. "I don't need no Puerto Ricans living in the USA. And don't dig no Pakistanis taking all the people's jobs." In an interview in Playboy magazine in 1980, Lennon described it as a better version of Lady Madonna. You know, a potboiler rewrite. On January 23, the group tried to record the song properly. Bootleg recordings preserve a conversation between McCartney and Harrison between takes discussing the song, and McCartney explaining the original protest song concept. The recording captures the group deciding to drop the third verse largely because McCartney does not feel the verse is of high enough quality, although he likes the scanning of the word Pakistani. Here the song solidifies in its 2-verse, 3-solo format. Recordings and post-production work. Billy Preston joined the Beatles on keyboards from January 22, having been recruited by Harrison partly with a view to deter bickering among the Beatles. The group with Preston playing Fender Rhodes electric piano recorded about 10 takes on January 23. On January 27 they made a concerted effort to perfect Get Back, recording about 14 takes. By this time the song had the addition of a false ending and reprised coda. After numerous takes the band jammed some old numbers and then returned to Get Back one last time in an attempt to record the master take. This performance was considered to be the best yet. It was musically tight and punchy without mistakes, though the song finishes without the restart. On the session tape, George Harrison comments, "We missed that end." This is the version heard on the Let It Be Naked album. On January 28 the group attempted to recapture the previous day's performance and recorded several new takes, each including the coda. Whilst these takes were good, they did not quite achieve the quality of the best take from the previous day. The lineup for the released versions of Get Back was Paul McCartney, lead vocal and bass; John Lennon, lead guitar and backing vocal; George Harrison, rhythm guitar; Ringo Starr, drums; and Billy Preston, electric piano. Harrison, the usual lead guitarist, had temporarily quit the group on January 10, so Lennon worked out the lead guitar. The Beatles had EMI produce a mono remix of the track on April 4, completed by Jeff Jarrett. The Beatles were unhappy with the mix, and on April 7 McCartney and Glyn Johns worked at Olympic Studios to produce new remixes for the single release. They made an edited version using the best take of the main part of the song from January 27 and the best coda ending from January 28. The edit is so precise that it appears to be a continuous take, achieving the desired ending the Beatles had wanted all along. This was a divergence from the concept of straight live performance without studio trickery, but a relatively minor one, and avoids the somewhat abrupt ending of the version that is used on the Let It Be Naked album. The Beatles performed Get Back as part of the Beatles' rooftop performance, which took place on the roof of Apple Studios in Savile Row, London on January 30, 1969, an edited version of which was included in the Let It Be film. Get Back was performed in full 3 times. During the third, which marked the end of the rooftop performance, the Beatles were interrupted by the police, who had received complaints from office workers nearby. After the police spoke to Mal Evans, he turned off Lennon and Harrison's amplifiers only for Harrison to switch them back on, insisting that they finish the song. It was during this period that McCartney ad-libbed, "You've been playing on the roofs again, and that's no good, and you know your mummy doesn't like theater. She gets Anya. She's gonna have you arrested." Get Back. The third rooftop performance of Get Back is available on Anthology 3, the last song of the Beatles' final live performance. At the end of the last rooftop performance of Get Back, the audience applauds and McCartney says thanks, in reply to Maureen Starkey's cheering. Lennon adds, "I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we've passed the audition." Spector used some of the talk preceding the master take of January 27 and edited on these comments to make the album version sound different from the single. The stereo single version, and that of the B-side, Don't Let Me Down, were the first Beatles recordings to feature Starr's drum kit in true stereo, mixed across the left and right channels. This utilized the then fairly new 8-track recording technology and was a result of the growing popularity of stereo over mono. The only other Beatles track to employ this recording method was The End on Abbey Road. Releases, single version, on April 11, 1969, Apple Records released Get Back as a single in the United Kingdom, paired with Don't Let Me Down on the B-side. The single began its 17-week stay in the charts on April 26 at number 1, a position it held for 6 weeks. It was the first Beatles single to enter the official UK singles chart at the top. Get Back Don't Let Me Down was released in the United States on May 5. 5 days later, Get Back began its first of 12 weeks on the chart. 2 weeks after the song's chart debut it hit number 1, where it stayed for 5 weeks. Get Back became the band's 17th number 1 song in the US, surpassing Elvis Presley's previous record of 16 number 1s. In both the United Kingdom and the United States, the single was released by Apple, although EMI retained the rights to the song as part of their contract. It was the only Beatles single to include an accompanying artist's name, crediting Get Back Don't Let Me Down to the Beatles with Billy Preston. Neither Apple nor Capitol Records created a picture sleeve for the single, it was simply packaged in a sleeve stating The Beatles on Apple. Apple launched a print ad campaign for the song concurrent with its release, showing a photo of the band with the slogan "The Beatles as Nature Intended," indicating that the sound of Get Back harked to the group's earlier days. The single version of the song contains a tape echo effect throughout and a coda after a false ending, with the lyrics "Get back Loretta / your mommy's waiting for you / wearing her high heel shoes / and her low neck sweater / get back home, Loretta." This does not appear on the album version. The single version's first LP appearance would come 3 years later on the 1967-1970 compilation. This version also appeared in the album's 20 Greatest Hits, Past Masters and The Beatles 1. It was also included in the original lineup of the proposed Get Back album that was scheduled to be released during the fall of 1969. In Britain and Europe, Get Back Don't Let Me Down was the Beatles' last single to be released in mono, but in the US the single was released in stereo. It was the Beatles' first single to be released in true stereo instead of mono as part of the stereo-only movement gaining force in 1969. In both versions the lead guitar played by Lennon is in the left channel and the rhythm guitar played by Harrison is in the right channel. The single was also released in the experimental pocket disc format by Americom in conjunction with Apple and Capitol in the late 1960s. Let It Be version. When Phil Spector came to remix Get Back he wanted to make it seem different from the version released as the single, though both versions were the same take. The previous unreleased Get Back albums included elements of studio chatter to add to the live feel of the recordings. In this spirit, Spector included part of the studio chatter recorded immediately before the master take and added McCartney and Lennon's remarks after the close of the rooftop performance. This created the impression that the single and album versions are different takes. The single's echo effect was also omitted from the remix. Let It Be. Naked version. In 2003, Get Back was re-released on the Let It Be. Naked album, remixed by independent producers with the sanction of the surviving ex-Beatles Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr, with John Lennon's and George Harrison's widows. The naked version of Get Back is ostensibly a cleaned-up version of the single version albeit much shorter as there is a fade immediately before the final Who, and coda. Apple also prepared a specially created music video of the Let It Be. Naked release of the song to promote that album in 2003. This video is edited together using stock footage of the band, along with Billy Preston, George Martin and others. Love version. In 2006 a newly mixed version of Get Back produced by George Martin and his son Giles was included on the album Love. This version incorporates elements of A Hard Day's Night, A Day in the Life, The End, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. However, there are several edits in this piece, including an extended intro, and the second verse is removed completely. Late Show performance. McCartney performed Get Back on The Late Show with David Letterman on July 15, 2009. Letterman's show is taped in the Ed Sullivan Theatre, the same theatre that hosted the Beatles' performance on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. McCartney's performance was not on the stage, however. Instead, he performed atop the theatre's marquee overlooking Broadway. In the interview preceding the performance, Letterman asked McCartney if he had ever played on a marquee before. "I've done a roof," McCartney replied, referring to the Beatles' 1969 performance atop the Apple Corps building in London. Saturday Night Live performance. McCartney also performed the song as a kind of encore on Saturday Night Live on December 11, 2010. The performance was unusual for the show because McCartney had played the two standard songs that musical guests play, then had played a third song. At the normal conclusion of the show, when host Paul Rudd thanked the cast, McCartney took the stage again for Get Back, the broadcast of which was partially cut off due to time constraints. Personnel: Paul McCartney a Euro-led vocal, bass, John Lennon a Euro-led guitar, harmony vocal, George Harrison a Euro rhythm guitar, Ringo Starr a Euro drums, Billy Preston a Euro electric piano. Covers: soul singer Doris Troy with assistance from Harrison, recorded the song as the B-side of her version of the folk song Jacob's Ladder on the Beatles' own Apple label. Steve Weriner covered the song on the 1995 album Come Together, America Salutes the Beatles. His rendition charted at number 72 on Hot Country Songs. Elvis Presley frequently featured it in his early 1970s concerts in a medley with Little Sister. Parodies and cultural references: The Rutles' Get Up and Go, written by Neil Innes, features a set of lyrics parodying Get Back. The lyrics are about a jockey by the name of Joe who leaves his one-horse town set to an almost identical melody. This apparently caused a copyright dispute which resulted in the song being omitted from the Beatles soundtrack album, although it was reinstated for the later CD reissue. The protagonists of Hirohiko Araki's manga JoJo's Bizarre Adventure were thought to be nicknamed JoJo as a reference to Get Back, but this was later confirmed to be untrue. The opening track should have been Me on Tiffany's 1987 debut album randomly uses the line Get Back, JoJo at the end, likely to be a Beatles reference since one of the singles taken from the album was a cover of I Saw Her Standing There. At the end of The Simpsons episode Homer's Barbershop Quartet, all the members of the B-Sharp sing their first hit on Moe's rooftop while George Harrison, driving by, says it's been done. Also, at the end of their song, Homer says the ending comments, "And I hope we passed the audition," followed by everyone laughing and Barney saying I don't get it. In the 2007 film, Across the Universe, directed by Julie Taymor, most characters are named after lyrics in Beatles songs. A principal character is named JoJo, an African-American who was played by Martin Luther McCoy. In February 2010, NBC used a cover of the song in commercials to promote Jay Leno's return to the 11:35 p.m. time slot for The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Notes. References. External links: Alan W. Polak's Notes on Get Back, Cummings, Alex Seff. No Pakistan is the racial satire that Beatles don't want you to hear. Salon. Retrieved July 14, 2013. Full lyrics of this song at Metro Lyrics.